Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My truck died somewhere between Talk Cutoff and Delta Junction, on a stretch of highway that looked exactly like the 100 miles before it, and exactly like the 100 miles after. White, flat, empty. A place so blank it felt unfinished, like the world had simply stopped rendering past a certain point. The temperature gauge on my dashboard had been frozen at minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit for over an hour. I remember staring at it, thinking the number didn't feel real. It felt like something you'd hear a scientist say on a documentary about Antarctica, not something you were supposed to experience sitting behind the wheel of a used pickup truck on a public road in the United States. I was relocating from Seattle to Fairbanks for work. The offer had been too good to refuse. Better pay, better title, a chance to finally stop drifting. My 10-year high school reunion a few months earlier had been a quiet humiliation. Everyone else had houses, kids, stability. I had roommates and a lease that renewed every year like a reminder that I was still standing in place. This move was supposed to be a reset. The plan sounded reasonable when I laid it out on paper. Drive the Alaska highway in early December, beat the worst storms, get settled before the holidays, start over in January. I did everything the internet told me to do. Full tank of gas, extra fuel can, blankets, food, flares, boots, gloves, a checklist printed out and folded into my glove compartment like a talisman. None of it mattered. The engine sputtered once, then again. Dashboard lights flickered like dying stars. Then the truck shuddered and went silent. I turned the key again. Nothing. Again. Weaker. Again. Just a click. The sound reminded me of a heartbeat giving up. The heater stopped instantly. Within seconds, I could feel the cold pressing against the cabin, like it had been waiting outside the windows the entire time, hands flat against the glass. Patient. I grabbed my phone out of habit, already knowing the truth. No signal. No bars. No data. Just a dead rectangle in my hand. Outside, the sun hung low in the sky, even though my watch said it was barely 2 p.m. That strange Alaskan winter light that looks like a permanent sunset. Beautiful, distant, and deeply misleading. I figured I had maybe 3 hours before full darkness. 3 hours before this place stopped pretending to be survivable. I looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. No cars, no buildings, no trees close enough to break the wind. Just an endless white plain with a dark strip of asphalt slicing through it like a scar. The silence was complete. Heavy. So total I could hear my own pulse in my ears. That was the moment fear stopped being theoretical. Every survival article says the same thing. Stay with your vehicle. Your car is shelter. It's visible. It blocks the wind. Those articles are written for temperatures like minus 10 or minus 20. For places where rescue might actually come before nightfall. At minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit, the math changes. I knew enough to understand the reality. Exposed skin freezes in minutes. Your core temperature drops fast once you stop producing heat. Blankets help, but not enough when the thing killing you is the air itself. I did the calculation in my head. If no one drove by tonight, and no one had passed in hours, I would be dead by morning. That wasn't pessimism. That was physics. Then I remembered a sign I'd passed maybe 30 minutes back. I hadn't even slowed down to read it properly at the time. Highway Maintenance Station, 8 miles, 8 miles. In normal conditions, that's nothing. I'd run half marathons along Seattle's waterfront and convinced myself that made me fit. But this wasn't a waterfront. This was Arctic winter, in snow boots, in a jacket meant for rain, not survival, with the sun already sinking. I sat in the truck for another 10 minutes, watching frost bloom across the inside of the windows like white flowers. My fingers stiffened even with gloves on. The decision made itself. Staying meant certain death. Walking meant maybe death. I chose maybe. I stuffed my backpack with granola bars and water bottles, wrapped a scarf around my face until only my eyes were exposed, and stepped out of the truck. The cold hit me like a wall. The first breath felt like inhaling broken glass. My nostrils stuck together for a second, frozen shut, and I had to force air in through my mouth. My eyes watered instantly, and the moisture began to freeze on my eyelashes. I started walking north along the highway, keeping my boots on the asphalt. The road was my anchor. Wander into the snow, and you lose direction fast. Each step required focus. The packed snow was slick, unforgiving. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, not too fast. Sweating in this cold would kill me faster than the temperature. Wet fabric steals heat like a thief. So I walked like I was on a casual stroll, while every instinct screamed that something was wrong. After 20 minutes, I couldn't feel my toes. 2 pairs of socks, insulated boots, useless. The cold crept in anyway, through rubber and wool until my feet felt like blocks of wood bolted to my legs. I kept walking. Stopping wasn't an option. I curled my toes inside my boots, trying to force blood into them, trying to feel anything. My fingers were next, even inside gloves, even inside pockets. The numbness spread from the tips to the knuckles, then toward my wrists. I checked my watch. Almost 40 minutes, maybe 2 miles covered, 6 miles to go. The sun dropped lower, staining the sky orange and purple, beautiful colors that meant I was running out of time. Around the 1-hour mark, something changed. I noticed it happening. My thoughts slowed, like a computer running too many programs. I'd start thinking about something: food, distance, time, and then lose the thread completely. I caught myself stopping in the middle of the road for no reason, just standing there staring at the horizon. Each time, I had to force myself to move again. My body wanted to rest. Just sit down. Just for a minute. I knew that voice. I knew it meant death. I started talking to myself out loud just to stay anchored. The road began to look wrong. I could have sworn there was a building ahead, a dark shape against the snow. I walked toward it for several minutes before realizing it was just a shadow, a trick of light. That terrified me more than the cold. If I was seeing things already, how much longer before I walked off the road without realizing it? My vision blurred at the edges. Tears froze to my lashes, gluing my eyelids together. I wiped them with frozen gloves, making it worse. Then I noticed something else. I wasn't shivering anymore. The cold didn't hurt. That's when panic should have saved me. But my brain was already slipping. When the shivering stops, your body has given up. I don't remember leaving the road. That's the part that still haunts me. One moment I was following the asphalt, telling myself to keep moving. The next, I was knee-deep in open snow, surrounded by nothing. No road, no landmarks, just white meeting gray sky in every direction. I must have wandered off during one of those foggy moments. Maybe I chased another phantom shape in the distance. I tried to turn back, Everything looked the same. I picked a direction and walked, knowing I was guessing. The sun slipped below the horizon, leaving a thin red scar in the sky. Then even that was gone. My legs stopped working properly. First they felt heavy, then they refused to bend. I fell once, then again. Each time it took longer to get back up. The last time I went down, I remember thinking how soft the snow felt. How warm. That's what scared me most. I forced myself to my knees, then my feet. Standing felt like a victory. I couldn't see anything anymore, just darkness settling over white ground. I took a few more steps. 10, maybe 20. Then my body quit. My legs locked, my knees buckled. I went down into the snow one final time. I woke up in a hospital in Fairbanks 3 days later. For hours, I had no idea where I was. A nurse told me a snowplow driver had found my truck and called it in. Search and rescue followed my footprints along the highway for about 4 miles. Then the tracks ended, just stopped. In the middle of an open field, they searched for hours. Dogs, helicopters. A volunteer on a snowmobile finally spotted me nearly a mile away, lying face down in a shallow ditch, invisible from the air. My core temperature was 26 degrees Celsius. The doctor said most people don't come back from that. I lost toes, fingers. They called me lucky. I still don't know how I crossed that mile with no footprints, no trail, nothing. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what part of me was still walking when the rest had already given up. November in Alaska doesn't arrive suddenly. It creeps in, slow and quiet, draining color from the world like blood from a wound. By the time people realize winter is here, the land already feels abandoned. That November, the one that changed my life, felt worse than any before it. The cold wasn't just in the air. It sat in my chest. It followed me into rooms. It whispered. I had been working as a crime reporter for the Anchorage Sentinel since graduating journalism school in 2010. Most reporters dream of moving south, Seattle, Denver, somewhere alive. I stayed because Alaska hides stories people don't want to look at. Out here, silence swallows mistakes. Out here, people vanish, and the land never explains why. That morning, my editor slid a thick folder across my desk. No smile, no small talk. Inside were 6 missing persons cases, spanning nearly 15 years. Every single one had the same detail buried deep in the reports. Last known location, Black Hollow Mine. The mine sat near a forgotten settlement once called Coldwater Pass, about 40 miles from the nearest paved road. It had shut down in 1986 after a collapse killed 4 workers underground. Officially, it was sealed. Unofficially, hikers, thrill seekers, and amateur explorers kept finding their way inside. None of them ever came back out. Local authorities stopped active searches after the 3rd disappearance. The cave system was unstable, deep, and brutally cold. Recovery teams risked becoming victims themselves. The families were left with nothing. No bodies, no closure, no answers. Something about that silence got under my skin. I volunteered to investigate. For 3 weeks, I buried myself in research, old mining blueprints, ranger reports, rescue logs, personal journals donated by grieving families. That's how I found Dr. Mara Kessler. She led a geological survey team from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and had been fighting the state for years. Either seal Black Hollow permanently or fund a proper documentation expedition. She lost a graduate student there in 2015. When I contacted her for an interview, she didn't hesitate. Instead, she offered me something better. Her team was heading into the mine that Friday, one last time, before winter sealed the mountain until spring. "Come with us," she said. "See it for yourself." I said yes without hesitation. That was my first mistake. We met at a remote ranger station just after dawn. The temperature was so low my breath froze on my eyelashes. Besides Mara and me, there were 4 others. Graham Holt, senior geologist, early 60s, soft-spoken, had mapped caves on 3 continents. Naomi Reyes, documentation specialist, handled audio and video, serious, rarely spoke. Lucas Harlan, safety coordinator, ropes, harnesses, emergency protocols, nervous hands, always checking gear. Ranger Bill Mercer, not coming inside, just there to make us sign waivers that essentially said, if you die, Alaska isn't responsible. Bill warned us plainly, if you're not back by nightfall, nobody's coming until spring. The hike took nearly 4 hours. Dense spruce forest, loose shale, black ice hiding beneath snow. The mountain didn't feel asleep, it felt watchful. Then we saw it. The mine entrance, a black wound in the mountainside, rotting timber supports, a rusted warning sign hanging crooked from a chain. The opening sloped downward into darkness that swallowed light. Cold air rushed out, like the mountain was breathing. We entered just after noon, roped together. Lucas led. Graham brought up the rear. Within the first 100 feet, the temperature dropped sharply. The darkness changed. It wasn't empty. It was thick, pressing against our headlamps like fog made of stone. The main shaft descended nearly 300 meters before opening into a wide chamber. Rusted equipment littered the floor, old carts, coiled ropes turned brittle with age. Mara pointed her light toward 3 tunnels branching away. Left, collapsed section from 1986. Center, flooded dead end. Right, where most disappearances occurred. We took the right tunnel. About 40 minutes in, Lucas stopped us. Something reflective sat wedged between 2 rocks. A hiking boot, faded orange, distinct zigzag tread. Inside, still laced tight, was a wool sock. Mara checked her files. It belonged to Aaron Bell, a 23-year-old student who vanished in 2018. We found only 1 boot, no body, no blood, just absence. An hour later, the tunnel opened into another chamber. This one felt wrong. Not empty. Occupied. A torn sleeping bag lay against the wall. A camping stove. Empty water bottles. Energy bar wrappers scattered across stone. A backpack dumped open. Mara read the name stitched into the strap. Hannah Crowley. Hannah was part of a 4-person spelunking group that entered Black Hollow in October 2019. None returned. Someone had survived down here. For a while. Graham found a digital audio recorder tucked into a rock crevice. Somehow, the battery still held a faint charge. Mara wanted to wait. Naomi didn't. Curiosity won. The first recording was cheerful. Excited voices. Laughter. Hannah narrating their progress. 4 friends exploring something new. The second recording, 2 days later, was different. A collapse blocked their exit. Food running low. Flashlights failing. 1 member injured. Another voice. Eli kept insisting he heard footsteps deeper in the mine. "Not animals," he said. "People." The others brushed it off. The third recording made my stomach turn. 6 days trapped. 1 dead after a fight over water. Eli disappeared into a side tunnel and never returned. The injured member was delirious with fever. Hannah whispered now. She described footsteps, always just beyond the light, always moving away when she called out. The recording ended with a scraping sound, low, layered, coming from multiple directions. Then 1 word. Run. We packed up fast. Lucas started organizing gear. He counted heads. Once, twice, 3 times. His face went white. "Where's Graham?" We called his name. Our voices bounced back, distorted. His pack lay on the ground. He was gone. Mara wanted to leave immediately. We compromised. Lucas and I checked 2 unexplored passages. One dead-ended. The second went deeper. That's where I saw it. A fresh footprint in wet mud, pointing away. The tread matched Graham's boots. I called his name. The tunnel answered with something that might have been wind or breathing. Lucas pulled me back. Time was up. We left. Every sound made us flinch. Every shadow moved wrong. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind us. We emerged just as daylight died. Ranger Mercer listened. He didn't look surprised. The official report said Graham likely fell into an unmapped shaft. His body was never found. The mine was sealed the following spring. I published my article. Most details were cut. The families called for months. I never told them about the footsteps, or the footprint, or the sound I heard just before we turned back. A whisper, saying my name in Graham's voice. Nobody ever tells you how aggressive silence can be. Not the peaceful kind people talk about when they escape the city. I mean the kind of silence that presses in from all directions, filling every gap inside your head until your own thoughts start sounding foreign. The kind that feels intentional, like it's listening. I learned that lesson in the winter of 2019, in the interior of Alaska, where the land doesn't care if you live or die, and the silence makes sure you understand that. My name doesn't matter anymore. Out there, identity strips away quickly. You become weight, heat, breath, resources that run out. At 36, my life had already fractured beyond recognition. A divorce finalized 6 months earlier had taken my savings, my house, and whatever illusion of stability I had built through my 30s. My ex-wife moved back east. I stayed behind, pretending I was fine while sleeping on a friend's couch and refreshing job boards at 3 in the morning. That's when the contract offer came. A private communications infrastructure company needed technicians willing to install and service satellite relay units in remote Alaskan regions. Temporary work, high risk, extremely high pay. The email said, ideal for individuals comfortable with isolation and extreme conditions. I told myself I was. I had grown up in northern Wisconsin, survived harsh winters, worked long nights in server rooms where the hum of machines replaced human voices. I thought I understood isolation. I didn't understand absence. My base was a town called Cold Bay Junction, barely a town at all. One runway, one diner, one bar that smelled like spilled beer and regret. Planes came and went like rumors. People didn't stay long unless they had nowhere else to go. On the morning everything ended and began, I woke before my alarm. The motel room was overheated, dry, and smelled faintly of disinfectant. Frost traced the inside of the window like pale veins, blocking the gray morning light. I remember staring at that frost longer than necessary, feeling unsettled without knowing why. Outside, the temperature sat around minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. My pilot for the day was Russell Monroe, mid-50s, thin frame, calm eyes that never fully relaxed. He'd flown bush routes for nearly 3 decades and treated danger like weather, something you acknowledged but didn't argue with. He was already inspecting the aircraft when I reached the airstrip. A Cessna 185, old but meticulously maintained. Faded paint, patched panels, The kind of plane that stayed alive because someone refused to let it die. "She's solid," Russell said when he noticed me looking. "She just talks a lot when she's cold." We were scheduled to hit 3 relay sites along the Yukon Flats, then return before dusk. Weather reports were manageable, which in Alaska means forgiving until it isn't. We lifted off just after sunrise. From the air, the world below looked unreal. Endless white, interrupted only by frozen rivers winding like dark scars through the snow. No roads, no movement, no proof anyone had ever been there before us. The engine's drone vibrated through my bones. Russell flew quietly, adjusting controls with casual precision, occasionally pointing out landmarks I'd never remember. We completed the first stop without issue. The second took longer. Snow deeper. Wind sharper. By early afternoon, we were headed toward the final site, a small relay hub near a frozen tributary. That's when the engine hesitated. Not enough to alarm me at first. Just a subtle break in rhythm. Russell noticed instantly. His posture changed. Hands tightened. Eyes flicked across the instrument panel. The engine coughed again, this time harder. "All right," he muttered, more to the plane than to me. He adjusted fuel flow, checked mixture, tapped gauges like he expected them to answer. The engine sputtered a third time, then went silent. The absence of sound was immediate and violent. The plane dropped into a glide. Wind roared past the fuselage. The airframe groaned as if protesting the idea of falling. Russell grabbed the radio, voice sharp but controlled, transmitting our position. Static crackled back. Fragmented responses, half-lost coordinates. Below us stretched nothing but wilderness. No roads, no buildings, no clear landing zone. Just snow-covered hills, buried trees, and frozen ground waiting to break us. I remember looking at our shadow sliding across the tundra and thinking how small it was, how temporary. Russell didn't panic. That scared me more than panic would have. He scanned the terrain desperately, searching for anything flat enough to gamble on. There was nothing. "Brace," he said calmly. "Tight!" The ground rose fast. We clipped something, a hidden ridge, maybe a buried log, and the plane spun violently. Metal screamed. The world inverted. Glass exploded inward. Then came impact. My memory fractures after that. Flashes. The windshield collapsing. Cold air punching the breath from my lungs. Pain detonating in my left leg. When motion stopped, I was hanging sideways in my seat, disoriented, ears ringing, blood dripping somewhere nearby. The cold rushed in immediately. It wasn't gradual. It was aggressive, like being stabbed repeatedly with ice. I turned my head. Russell was slumped forward, unmoving. Blood spread beneath him, dark against the snow seeping into the cockpit. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The silence swallowed everything. Getting free from the seatbelt took forever. My fingers already numb, refusing to cooperate. Every movement sent fire through my leg. When I reached Russell, I already knew. A section of the instrument panel had torn loose during impact, driven into his chest. There was no pulse, no warmth, just stillness. I sat there for a long moment, shivering violently, breath fogging the air, trying to process that I was alone now, truly alone. Survival mode forced its way in before grief could settle. My left leg was badly injured, swollen, discolored. The bone pressed visibly against the skin below my knee. Not broken through. Yet. Cuts lined my face and hands. My ribs screamed when I breathed. Outside, the temperature was dropping fast, the sun already beginning its descent. I crawled toward the rear of the cabin, scavenging through wreckage with shaking hands. My backpack was intact. Inside, a spare jacket, 2 protein bars, a thermos with half-cold coffee, a lighter I carried out of habit. No radio. The emergency beacon was crushed. Dead. The fuselage, at least, offered shelter from the wind. Night fell fast, and with it came darkness unlike anything I had known. No moonlight, no distant glow, just complete blackness pressing against the broken plane. The silence returned. It felt heavier now. I rationed the coffee, ate half a bar, wrapped my leg as tightly as I could using torn seat fabric. Sleep never came. Every sound felt deliberate. Metal settling, wind howling, something moving, or maybe not. By morning, my leg had doubled in size, purple and black spreading beneath the skin. My toes were numb. I knew enough to be afraid. The second day blurred into pain, cold, and hallucinations. I spoke out loud just to hear a voice. I apologized to Russell, told him things he'd never need to know, bargained with no one. At one point, I was certain someone was standing outside the wreckage, watching, waiting. I built a small fire using insulation and scraps. Smoke rose weakly into the pale sky. It felt useless. The land swallowed it. By the third night, I stopped shivering. I knew what that meant. The thought of giving up felt peaceful. Then I heard it. Distant. Faint. Rotors. I don't remember much after that. Light. Voices. Hands. Warmth. I woke up in Anchorage 3 days later. My left leg was gone below the knee. They told me I survived by hours. I live in Nevada now. Warm. Quiet. But sometimes, when everything goes silent, I hear it again. That same silence. Still waiting. After my college graduation in 2016, the 3 of us made a promise that felt unbreakable at the time. One last adventure before adulthood swallowed us whole. I had a job offer waiting back home. Brandon, my closest friend since high school, had just completed his emergency medical training and was about to start working full-time. Avery was accepted into law school and would be leaving the state by fall. August was the only window where our lives hadn't yet slammed shut. Alaska wasn't just a destination. It was a statement. Wild. Empty. Untouched. Or so we thought. Brandon's cousin worked seasonal jobs along the coast near Valdez, and over a late-night phone call, he told us about an abandoned hunting lodge buried deep in the Chugach Mountains, 40 miles from the nearest paved road. No owners, no maintenance, no tourists. The lodge had been shut down in the early 1990s after the original owner died under circumstances no one liked to talk about. That should have been enough to stop us. Instead, it became the reason we went. We told ourselves we'd hike in, stay 2 nights, take photos, maybe spot wildlife, and hike back out. A controlled risk. A story we'd laugh about years later. None of us imagined that only 2 of us would leave those mountains alive. We flew into Anchorage on a Thursday morning, rented a battered Jeep, and drove for nearly 6 hours through roads that grew narrower and lonelier the farther we went. Civilization thinned out until it felt more like a rumor than a place. Our last stop was a settlement called Iron Creek Junction. Barely more than a general store, a gas pump, and a scattering of houses clinging to gravel roads. The woman behind the counter was in her late 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp despite her age. Her name tag read, Marlene. When we mentioned the lodge, her expression changed instantly. Not fear, recognition. People avoid that part of the mountains, she said flatly. Always have. She told us about hikers seeing figures between the trees, lights moving where no camps were set, sounds that didn't belong to animals. Her words stuck with me. That forest doesn't like strangers. It keeps them." Brandon laughed it off, calling it backwoods superstition. Avery didn't laugh. Neither did I. We bought extra batteries, canned food, and a paper map. Cell service ended miles ago. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Marlene watching us through the store window. She looked resigned, like someone who had already accepted the ending. The hike took nearly 7 hours. The trail vanished after the first couple of miles, leaving us to navigate by map and compass. The Chugach Mountains were beautiful in a way that felt hostile. Towering spruce trees packed so tightly you could lose someone 10 feet away. Silence so deep it made every footstep sound intrusive. Around mile 6, Avery stopped suddenly. Carved into a tree was a crude symbol, a stick figure with raised arms, and beneath it, scratched deep into the bark. Turned back, the carving was old, weathered, desperate. Brandon brushed it off, but none of us forgot it. We reached the lodge just before sunset. It was larger than expected. 2 stories, wrap-around porch, roof sagging in the middle like a broken spine. Windows shattered or boarded up, moss and rot coated the wood. A sour smell hung thick in the air. The front door groaned open. Inside, furniture still sat where it had been abandoned decades earlier. A couch torn apart, a table thick with dust, a stone fireplace filled with cold ash. Then we saw the kitchen. Modern canned food sat neatly on the counter, not rusted, not old. Avery checked one, not expired. Someone had been there recently. We should have left, but exhaustion and fading light made cowards of us. We decided to stay the night and leave at first light. That decision still follows me into my dreams. We set up sleeping bags near the fireplace. Brandon built a fire using neatly stacked wood, another detail we ignored when we shouldn't have. Around 9, Avery went outside to use the outhouse. 10 minutes later, she screamed, a real scream. We ran. Behind the outhouse, her flashlight pointed at the ground, her body shaking uncontrollably. Bones, human bones, rib cages, femurs, skull fragments, multiple piles. The smell finally made sense. We barricaded ourselves inside. At 3 a.m., footsteps crossed the porch. Heavy, slow, 3 knocks, then a voice. "I know you're in there." "This is my home." The handle shifted, then silence. At dawn, we ran. 50 yards into the tree line, Avery stopped. A man stood on the porch, tall, gaunt, beard down to his chest. He smiled, patiently. We fled into the forest. We got lost. Then came the whistles. Multiple, coordinated. We weren't being chased. We were being herded. In a clearing, another message carved into a tree. "No one comes. He keeps us here." The attack came fast. Not the man from the lodge. Someone younger. Faster. Armed with chain. Brandon went down. We barely escaped. For hours we ran until we heard water. A river. Cold enough to burn. We followed it until we found a bridge. A pickup stopped. The driver didn't ask questions. State troopers listened. Then one of them said a name. Caleb Rourke. An escaped violent offender. A man who turned the wilderness into a hunting ground. 3 days later, they raided the lodge. They found 17 sets of remains. They found journals. They found proof. Brandon survived. Avery changed her life. I stayed the same, but broken. The wilderness isn't empty. It's patient. Every summer since my father died, I make the same journey north. I don't tell most people why. To them, it's just a fishing trip, a quiet escape from Seattle, From classrooms full of fourth graders, from lesson plans and parent emails, and the constant noise of modern life. But the truth is simpler and heavier than that. My dad taught me how to fish, not casually, patiently. He taught me how to read a river the way other men read books, where the current slows just enough for salmon to rest, how to tell the difference between water that looks calm and water that will knock you flat in a second. He taught me respect for the fish, for the land, for the things bigger than you. When he passed, something inside me went silent, and the only place that silence ever felt familiar was on an Alaskan riverbank. The Kai Peninsula became my ritual. 6 summers in a row, I made the same solo trip. Same trail, same campsite, same bend in the river where the salmon stacked up before pushing upstream. It became my reset button before every new school year. My way of reminding myself that I still knew who I was. That year, I turned 37. My birthday fell in late July, and the idea of spending it alone, truly alone, with nothing but water, wind, and birdsong, felt right. Honest. I'd had a few close calls over the years. A moose that charged once, a slip on slick rocks that nearly pulled me into the current. But nothing that made me question coming back. Nothing until that summer. I flew into Anchorage on a Tuesday morning, picked up my rental, a beat-up Ford pickup that smelled like stale cigarettes and old coffee, and started the 4-hour drive south. The farther I went, the thinner the world became. Cell signal vanished, traffic disappeared, gas stations turned into long stretches of nothing. I stopped in Satna like I always did. Last-minute supplies, fuel, and a quick check-in at the ranger station. That was part of my routine. Respect the land. Let someone know where you'll be. The ranger at the desk wasn't one I recognized. Younger. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. His uniform looked newer than his eyes. He asked for my destination. When I told him the Kai Peninsula, his fingers paused over the keyboard. He warned me about increased bear activity. Strong salmon run, he said. Brown bears coming down earlier than usual. Big males. Territorial. I told him what I always told rangers. I had bear spray, an air horn, proper food storage, years of experience. He nodded, but his expression didn't relax. There was a weight behind his eyes, like he wanted to add something and decided not to. I remember that moment clearly now. The hesitation. The look you give someone when you know more than you're allowed to say. I wish I'd asked. I didn't. The hike in took just under 2.5 hours. My pack was heavier than usual. Extra food for a 5-day stay. The trail thinned quickly. Most anglers never went this far. Easier access spots closer to roads pulled them in. That isolation was always the point. My campsite sat on a slight rise about 60 feet from the river, shielded by thick spruce on 3 sides. The river curved there, forming a deep pool where salmon gathered. I'd caught my limit every year without fail. I set up my tent, hung my food cache from the old steel wire someone had installed years back between 2 tall trees, and walked down to the water. The river was higher than I remembered. Snowmelt, probably. The water had that cloudy glacial color. Cold, heavy, deceptive. Fish flashed silver near the center current. I felt that familiar excitement in my chest. That first evening was perfect. 3 sockeye before dusk. I kept 2, released 1. Cooked dinner on my stove. Cleaned everything downstream. Washed thoroughly. Changed clothes. No shortcuts. No mistakes. Around 10, still light that far north, I noticed movement across the river. A large brown shape moving through brush. maybe 200 yards away. I couldn't see it clearly, but I didn't need to. The rolling gait gave it away. A brown bear. It ignored me completely. Just worked its way along the far shore, probably fishing its own spots. I watched until it vanished into the trees. I remember feeling lucky, grateful, not scared. That night, I zipped my tent tight and fell asleep to rushing water. I woke up around 3 in the morning. Something was moving through the brush. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. 30, maybe 40 feet away. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might give me away. I lay frozen, hand wrapped around my bear spray. The steps circled, back and forth, tree line to river, river to trees. Then it stopped. A deep huff in breath, a low grunt, close enough that I smelled it. Wet fur, rot, fish. Time lost meaning. 20 minutes, an hour, maybe more. Eventually, the sounds moved off toward the river. Splashing followed. I didn't sleep again. At first light, I stepped outside. The ground was torn up near the trees, deep gouges in soft earth. And then the tracks. They were enormous. I put my boot next to one. The print was easily twice the size. Claw marks extended inches beyond the pad. I'd seen brown bear tracks before. This was something else. They circled my tent, 20 feet away, then led straight to the river. I stood there a long time, staring at how close it had come. I thought about leaving, and then I didn't. That decision still echoes. I told myself it was passing through, that my food hadn't been touched, that I was being dramatic. I cooked breakfast loudly, made noise, even fished a little that morning, though I stayed close to camp and kept spray clipped to my waders. The day was warm. Birds sang. Nothing happened. I relaxed. Around 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting on a rock near the water, eating a granola bar when I saw it. The bear emerged upstream on my side of the river, 150 yards away. It was massive. Dark brown fur, almost chocolate, with a silvery patch across one shoulder. It stepped to the water, paused, then turned its head, and looked directly at me. This matters. It saw me, and instead of leaving, it started walking toward me. Not charging, not bluffing. Walking. Steady. Intentional. I stood slowly, bear spray in one hand, air horn in the other. I backed away, eyes locked on it. I blasted the air horn. The sound echoed off the water. The bear paused, then kept coming. I yelled, waved my arms. Nothing. 75 yards. Closer. I could see its face now. Small, dark eyes, ears forward, focused. My instincts screamed to run, but I knew better. The bear reached the spot where I'd been sitting, sniffed the rock, sniffed the wrapper, then lifted its head. That low, rumbling grunt rolled through my chest. The trail was behind it. The river was to my left. I chose the river. I ran. The water hit like a wall of knives. Glacial cold locked my muscles instantly, waist deep, current pulling. I pushed forward, half swimming, half stumbling. I heard splashing behind me. I didn't look. Twice I went under. Swallowed icy water. Lost my footing. When I dragged myself onto the far bank, I was shaking uncontrollably. I turned. The bear stood at the water's edge, watching. Then it turned and walked back toward my camp, toward my tent, toward everything I owned. I was soaked, freezing, hypothermia creeping in. All I had was bear spray. I started walking downstream, 6 miles, through brush, uneven ground, wet clothes, dropping temperatures. I didn't think about making it. I just moved. Nearly 5 hours later, I stumbled into a fishing lodge. They wrapped me in blankets, called for a helicopter. My core temperature was 92 degrees. 2 nights in an Anchorage hospital. Mild frostbite. Hypothermia. The rangers checked my site. My tent was shredded, food cache destroyed, tracks everywhere. They said the bear was known, a large male, unusually bold, possibly fed by humans. They never caught it. I still fish, but never there again. And every time I see a bear, even from a distance, I remember that steady walk, that look, not curiosity, not fear, something else. Seattle had given me a life that looked complete from the outside. A stable position at a crowded outpatient clinic, a modest apartment overlooking a gray stretch of water, colleagues who understood what 12-hour shifts did to your body and your patients. But after nearly a decade as a nurse practitioner, I began to realize something was wrong. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It crept in slowly, between charting notes and medication refills, between polite conversations and rehearsed smiles. Every day felt identical to the last. Every week blurred into the next. I wasn't exhausted in the way sleep could fix. I was suffocating quietly. I needed more than a vacation, more than a new apartment or a different schedule. I needed distance, the kind of distance that erases routines, the kind that forces you to listen to yourself again. That's when I found the job posting, a public health clinician position in a remote Alaskan village called Kuyanak, population just under 200. Interior Alaska. No road access year-round. Supplies flown in by bush plane. Housing included. 2-year contract. Most people wouldn't have finished reading. I felt something click. While my former classmates were sharing photos of renovated kitchens and backyard barbecues, I was signing paperwork to work in a place most Americans would never see, let alone live in. My mother cried when I told her. My father asked if I was running from something. I didn't have an answer then. I arrived in Kuyanak on the last day of August. The tundra glowed gold and rust beneath the plane's wings, stretching endlessly in every direction. Daylight lingered well past 9 in the evening, painting the village in soft, deceptive warmth. A bush plane dropped me on a gravel airstrip half a mile from the settlement. Waiting there was Galen Arak, a council logistics coordinator, driving a pickup truck so old it rattled even at idle. He was quiet, not unfriendly, just careful with words. As we drove, he pointed out landmarks: the clinic, the fuel depot, the general store, the schoolhouse. When we passed a small cluster of houses set apart from the rest, he slowed slightly. "Those belong to the Karnak family," he said, voice flat. "They keep to themselves." I nodded, filing it away without much thought. Every small town has its unspoken rules, its invisible lines. I didn't yet know how dangerous some lines were. The clinic was functional, but outdated. Peeling paint, aging equipment, cabinets labeled with handwriting from decades ago. Still, it served its purpose. I treated everything from respiratory infections to chronic illness management. The villagers were polite, reserved, and observant. Conversations often ended abruptly, not awkwardly, just intentionally. I learned quickly that silence here meant more than words. A woman named Alira Tunit became my quiet guide. She worked at the general store and had lived in Kuyanak her entire life. She explained things gently, without making me feel foolish for asking. When I asked about the Karnaks, her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "They handle things their own way," she said. Then she asked if I needed help unloading supplies. I let it go. For a while. Mid-September brought the first incident. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, arrived at the clinic with her aunt. The child had a deep laceration along her forearm, clean cut. Serious, the kind that needed sutures immediately. As I prepared the tray, the aunt suddenly grabbed the girl and moved toward the door. "We're leaving," she said. I tried to explain infection risks, scarring, long-term damage. She didn't meet my eyes. It's already decided. They were gone before I could say another word. Later, when I mentioned it to Alira, she went very still. "That was Nera Karnak," she said quietly. "The child's name is Sova." "They don't use the clinic," she added. "They never have." I asked why. She shook her head. "Some things don't belong to medicine." October arrived abruptly. Not autumn. Winter's shadow. The cold wasn't sharp. It was invasive. It seeped into buildings, thoughts, and patience. Daylight shrank to a few pale hours before darkness returned like a closing fist. With fewer patients, I began organizing old clinic records. That's when patterns emerged. Death certificates mostly. Accidents, exposure, drownings, hunting mishaps. Normal for Alaska, until I noticed the names. Karnak, Belvik, Oshrin, again and again. 11 deaths across 3 families in 15 years, in a village of 200. I wrote everything down on a yellow legal pad and locked it in my desk drawer. The dates clustered tightly. Late October through early December. The most isolated time of year. I felt a chill unrelated to temperature. When I asked Galen about it, he stared at me for a long moment. "This place is hard," he said finally. "People don't always survive it." That was all. Alira was more direct. "Please stop," she whispered one evening. "Do your work. Get through winter. Decide later if you want to stay." She wasn't warning me for herself. That night, I returned to my cabin to find the door unlocked. My desk drawers were open. The yellow legal pad lay on my bed. On the last page, written in unfamiliar handwriting, "Winter remembers debts. Accidents are how they're paid." The satellite phone at the community center stopped working days later. No explanation. No timeline for repair. The last supply plane left on November 4th. The pilot asked if I wanted out. I said no. That decision still wakes me up at night. Alira came to my cabin after dark on November 19th. "There's going to be another death," she said. Then she told me everything. Decades ago, the Fountain families had made binding agreements: land, hunting rights, protection. When a family broke an oath, a life was owed. Not immediately. Eventually. The debt passed through generations until collected. This year, the Karnaks owed one, and the child I had tried to treat, Sova, had been chosen. I used an old shortwave radio hidden in the clinic storage room. It barely worked, but it was enough. State troopers arrived 4 days later by helicopter. Sova was removed. Several arrests followed. I was evacuated immediately. The investigation reclassified 7 deaths as homicide. Kuyanak disappeared from headlines within weeks. I still have the legal pad. Sometimes I wonder how many places like that still exist, where winter is long and accidents remember. Working at a temporary construction camp in Alaska felt like pressing pause on my life. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. That this wasn't permanent. That it was just a stretch of time I needed to endure. I took the job because the money was good. Better than anything I could find back home. And because I had debts that weren't going to erase themselves. The rotation schedule was what finally convinced me. 8 weeks on, 4 weeks off. Long enough to make progress. Short enough to pretend I still had control over my life. At that point, My world had become very small. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. Calls home were rare and short, whenever the satellite signal decided to cooperate. Most nights, I fell asleep fully dressed, boots lined up beside my bunk, alarms set out of habit more than necessity. The camp sat far from any real town, surrounded by uneven ground, frozen mud, and a horizon that always felt distant. No matter how long you stared at it, it never seemed to get closer. Rows of portable trailers were bolted into the dirt, like someone was afraid they might slide away if left unattended. At night, their windows glowed faintly, yellow squares against the dark, like a grid drawn on empty land. Most of us were strangers. People came from all over the country: Texas, Ohio, Montana, places with heat and crowds and neighbors close enough to hear you sneeze. Everyone had a reason for being there, and nobody asked what it was. That was the unspoken rule. Mind your work. Mind your time. Mind your business. It made things easier. It also made it easier for things to happen without anyone asking too many questions. The day everything started to bother me wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A guy named Colton Rhea, who bunked 2 trailers down from me, didn't show up for breakfast. That alone wasn't unusual. People slept through alarms all the time. But by lunch, his absence was noticeable. By dinner, it was strange. His locker was empty. His boots were gone. His bunk stripped bare. No note. No argument. No goodbye drinks. Management said he quit overnight. It happened fast, they said. Personal reasons. What bothered me wasn't the explanation. It was how quickly everyone accepted it. No one laughed it off. No one argued. It felt rehearsed, like a line everyone already knew. And it wasn't the first time. Over the previous months, workers had vanished between shifts. Not fired, not escorted out, just gone. Their names erased from the schedule, their positions reposted before their bunks cooled. People joked about it at first. Alaska got 'em, someone said once, half laughing. But the joke stopped after a while. That night, I worked late, doing equipment checks near the edge of camp, where the lights barely reached. The generators hummed unevenly, a sound that settled into your bones if you listened too long. The cold crept through my gloves no matter how tightly I clenched my fingers. Somewhere beyond the trailers, I heard voices. Low, sharp, angry. An argument, maybe. I couldn't see who it was, just the outline of movement between structures, someone staying close to the shadows. When I walked closer, the voices stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt deliberate, like I'd crossed into a room where I wasn't welcome. I stood there for a moment, staring at an empty stretch of gravel, my breath fogging the air. Then I went back to my route, telling myself I was tired. In the break room later, a newer worker named Parker Loon sat alone, staring at the floor. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He clocked out early. He didn't come back. By morning, Parker's trailer was locked and stripped, just like Colton's. This time, I noticed something else. Scuff marks near the steps, deep grooves in the frozen mud, like something heavy had been dragged or shoved hard. I mentioned it quietly to a supervisor. He didn't even look down. "Focus on your job," he said. That response stuck with me more than the marks themselves. After that, I started paying attention to the things people usually ignored. Conversation stopped when certain footsteps passed nearby. Some workers flinched at raised voices, even when someone was just joking. People avoided walking alone after dark, even for short distances. During dinner one night, I noticed bruising along the side of a guy's neck. His jacket collar hid most of it, but not all. I asked if he was okay. He forced a laugh and said he'd slipped on ice. The marks were too narrow, too uneven. He left camp 2 days later without collecting his final paycheck. Management posted his position as open before his bunk was cleaned out. It felt like the camp swallowed people whole, erased them, and kept running without slowing down. The tension peaked during a night shift when one of the welders, Mason Calder, failed to check in at the end of his rotation. His radio crackled with static when we tried to reach him. The supervisor delayed organizing a search. He probably wandered off to cool down, he said. That made no sense. The temperature was well below zero, and the terrain around the camp wasn't forgiving. You didn't wander anywhere without telling someone. Not if you wanted to come back. When we finally went looking, we found Mason's helmet near a storage container, dented, smeared with something dark. No blood trail, no signs of a fall, just silence and the wind dragging loose plastic against metal. By morning, Mason was officially listed as having quit mid-shift. Seeing it typed out on the board felt unreal, like watching someone rewrite reality while everyone else nodded along. A few days later, investigators arrived. Someone, no one ever admitted who, had contacted authorities outside the camp. They spoke to us one by one in a makeshift office, asking careful questions about fights, threats, and people leaving suddenly. At first, everyone was guarded. Then someone talked, then another. What surprised me was how similar the stories were once people felt safe enough to speak. Intimidation in dark hallways, warnings delivered in whispers, physical confrontations that were never reported. One name kept surfacing, always followed by long pauses. The camp's layout made it easy for someone to control space and information. Oversight was minimal. Records were sloppy. Complaints disappeared quietly. Listening to it all laid out, I realized this wasn't a series of coincidences. It was a system. The investigation uncovered years of ignored reports and unofficial settlements, all designed to keep the project running without disruption. Workers who resisted were pressured into leaving. Others stayed silent to protect their paychecks. Isolation did the rest. Eventually, the person responsible was removed under guard. Details were never shared with us. The camp didn't shut down. It adjusted. A new supervisor rotated in. A few trailers were moved. Extra lights were installed. We were told to report anything unusual. The word sounded empty by then. The atmosphere never recovered. Every sound after dark carried weight. Trust between co-workers felt permanently damaged. Sleep came in short, shallow bursts. The place had learned our routines. We couldn't unlearn what it had shown us. The day I decided to leave came quietly. No argument. No incident. I packed my duffel before dawn, hands moving on instinct while my mind replayed small moments I'd ignored before. Locked doors, blind spots, silence from management. I turned in my badge. No one asked why. That disturbed me the most. When the transport truck pulled away, I watched the trailer shrink into the distance, lined up neatly, like they hadn't held anything terrible inside them. Months later, back in normal life, the memories still surface. A generator hum can pull me right back. So can the smell of diesel and cold air. I read about similar camps online and see the same patterns repeated. Temporary jobs, isolated locations, workers who pass through without roots. It creates gaps, and gaps invite the wrong kind of people. I don't know what happened to everyone who disappeared. Some may have escaped. Others might not have. That uncertainty is harder to live with than a clear answer. If you ever find yourself somewhere remote, where people vanish quietly and no one wants to talk about it, pay attention. Leaving without explanation might look strange from the outside, but sometimes it's the only option left. At that point in my life, I was drifting between seasonal contracts, chasing work the way some people chase storms. Alaska felt like the right kind of distance. I was in my late 20s, traveling alone, picking up temporary jobs wherever someone needed an extra set of hands before winter sealed everything off. I didn't have much tying me down, just a packed sedan with too many miles on it, a notebook filled with numbers that stopped answering months ago, and an overconfidence in my own planning that I hadn't yet learned to question. That morning began like dozens before it. Gas station coffee that tasted more like burned plastic than beans, stiff shoulders from sleeping in the car, and a long ribbon of highway stretching north. I remember thinking that if I reached the next town before dark, the whole trip would stay clean and predictable. Alaska punishes poor timing more than poor intentions. The light was already thinning, stretched pale and low across the road, but nothing about the day felt dramatic. It felt routine, which is what makes it difficult to explain now. The roadside stop appeared suddenly, a squat concrete building crouched against miles of nothing. Its parking lot was chewed up by gravel and frozen ruts, tire tracks overlapping like careless signatures. Inside, the air smelled of scorched coffee, old fryer oil, and something faintly metallic. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with an uneven rhythm that made my temples ache. The woman behind the counter looked exhausted in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. Her eyes kept drifting toward the clock on the wall, pen tapping against the register, as if she were counting down seconds instead of minutes. I told her I was heading toward the next town and expected to be there before nightfall. The look she gave me lingered half a second too long. Not fear, exactly, but calculation. She said the road had been quiet lately, her voice careful, neutral, like she was reading from a script she'd practiced. Near the door, a corkboard sagged under the weight of handwritten notes. Rides needed, odd jobs, missing pets. One paper was torn halfway down, as if someone had changed their mind mid-thought. The edges were rough, ripped fast. That image followed me back to the car. The drive after that felt subtly wrong, though nothing obvious had changed. The highway narrowed and twisted, trees pressing closer until they swallowed sound itself. Radio stations dissolved into static, then vanished completely, leaving only the steady hum of the engine and the faint rattle of loose trim. For a while, I noticed a dark-colored vehicle behind me. Never got close enough for me to read a plate, never passed, never fell too far back. When it finally disappeared, the absence felt louder than its presence. I checked the dashboard clock too often, doing mental math about distance and fading daylight. The sky slipped toward that heavy blue-gray that arrives fast in remote places, like a curtain dropping without warning. I told myself I was imagining tension where there was none. Being alone for long stretches messes with your perception, or at least that's what I believed. The last clear decision I remember making was pulling over near a wide shoulder to double-check my map. The engine shut off, and silence rushed in immediately, thick and pressing. That was when I noticed my keys weren't in the cup holder, where I always dropped them. It seemed small, almost trivial, but my chest tightened anyway. I searched the seats, the floor, the console, telling myself not to jump to conclusions. Everything else was untouched. My bag was still zipped. My jacket lay folded the way I'd left it. No sign anyone had been inside the car. The road stretched empty in both directions, endless and indifferent. Standing there, surrounded by wilderness that didn't care whether I existed, I understood how easily someone could disappear without sound or witness. I stood longer than I should have, listening to the wind scrape through brush and feeling watched without seeing anyone. Eventually, I noticed impressions in the gravel that didn't match my tires. Faint, but fresh. Angled as if another vehicle had stopped nearby and rolled on. It unsettled me enough to make my pulse climb. I locked the car out of habit, even though I couldn't find the keys, and the contradiction made my head spin. The light kept draining color from the world, and waiting suddenly felt reckless. I decided to walk a short distance down the highway, thinking maybe the keys had fallen when I stepped out. That choice still echoes in my mind. The road felt longer on foot, every sound magnified. Gravel shifted under my boots, loud enough to make me flinch. After a few minutes, I heard an engine behind me. Slow, steady, not rushing. I moved closer to the shoulder, rehearsing what I'd say if it stopped. Friendly but guarded. Grateful, not desperate. The vehicle passed without slowing. I caught a glimpse of the driver's profile. Eyes forward, jaw tight, hands high on the wheel. No wave, no acknowledgement. The smell of exhaust lingered, then vanished. That was when the reality of my situation settled in. Night was coming fast, and I was suddenly very alone. I turned back toward my car, walking faster now, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't neatly explain. The forest on either side looked denser than before, like it had crept closer while I wasn't looking. When I reached the spot where I'd left the car, disbelief hit harder than fear. The car sat exactly where I'd parked it, but the driver's door stood open a few inches. Inside, nothing was disturbed. No broken glass. No mess. Just the open door waiting. I shut it slowly, every sense sharpened, weighing whether staying or leaving on foot made more sense. I stayed. That night passed in fragments. I curled low in the car, conserving heat, listening to every shift in the air. At some point, footsteps moved nearby. Careful. Measured. Stopping just far enough away that I couldn't pinpoint them. No flashlight. No voice. Just the unmistakable sound of someone standing there deciding something. When the steps finally retreated, they dissolved into the dark as quietly as they'd arrived. Morning came weak and gray. The keys sat on the hood, neatly placed as if for convenience. I didn't question it. I started the engine and drove until I reached a town with people, noise, and walls. Reports were filed. Searches were conducted. Nothing turned up. Even now, I don't know who was out there or what they wanted. I only know that isolation didn't protect me. It exposed me. Alaska didn't chase me. It waited. And waiting, I learned, can be far more dangerous than pursuit. I share this because places like that don't advertise their dangers. They sell distance, opportunity, and silence. If you ever find yourself somewhere remote where the road feels too quiet and the light fades too fast, pay attention. Leaving without answers might look strange from the outside, but sometimes it's the only decision that keeps you alive.